The controversial household... I'll try that again. The controversial household charge is due to be passed into law this week. In fact, I think the vote was last night, carried overwhelmingly, and it will hit homeowners with an extra cost of €100 per year from January. But this is only an interim measure, and house owners can expect a steep rise in the coming years when the charge will be replaced eventually by a property tax.
Here to discuss the charge and what it will mean for homeowners is the personal finance editor of the Irish Independent, Charlie Weston, and we're also joined by Socialist Party TD, Clare Daly, who is strongly opposed to the tax, and that's putting it mildly, I would say. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Clare, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, even Phil Hogan himself, who's in charge of this, has admitted that it's not, I think in quotes, a fair or an ideal system. So he's already saying it's flawed. You're going beyond that. You're going to refuse to pay it. Why?
Well, we have to. I mean, ironically enough, Fine Gael campaigned on this election against such charges as well, and it's totally unfair. The idea that somebody on a state pension would end up paying the same as somebody living in a mansion somewhere on Aylesbury Road is just ridiculous. I think on the back of all the other austerity that has taken place, it's just a step too far for people. I think one of the reasons why it's not just that it's a flat charge and that it's unfair, but it's where this is going. And it's when you read the legislation, it is quite clear that this is just the first step in what will be a very punitive new regime of local taxation, which I just don't think ordinary people can afford to pay.
So if you refuse to pay, does that mean you're going to end up having to pay the €2,500 fine?
No, the way in which the legislation is set up, they do seem to be placing a lot of emphasis on registration. It's a self-declaring tax. You've got to go and declare yourself. They're saying that if you don't do that, then you could face a court appearance, and then the outcome of that could be a fine of up to €2,500. The point we would make to that is clearly in an arena of 1.6 million homeowners, there's no way that even a tiny fraction of those people could be brought to court, and our experience previously has been that if people go in together and the campaign goes in and frustrates the court process by defending all the cases, then it's absolutely impossible for them to do that.
That whole self-registration model is a complete mess. I mean, if there's any significant boycott whatsoever, it would take years to pursue people through the courts. And then, even if you did prosecute them, you'd end up with more refuseniks in jail than you would real criminals. I mean, it's nonsense.
I think we have, you have to see it against the political backdrop of what's gone on in this country, and the idea even that they've passed legislation with such punitive sanctions on ordinary people when there's been such light touch regulation at the tops in the banks, amongst the political establishment and that, and the idea that the judiciary are going to go after ordinary people will be very difficult for them also, so I do think we have to see it in that it would take years, and it would be very, very, it'd be like throwing a match into a dynamite factory.
If only, say, 5,000 people refuse to register, just to pursue them through the Irish court system could take 10 to 20 years.
Well, it's going to be many more than that. It would take hundreds of years to pursue everybody, and that's the message that we want to get out there. There's a lot of intimidation being put on by the government of this, the roof will fall in if you don't pay, but as you say, it's completely impractical for them to pursue people in this way. And by people registering, the way the legislation is framed is you're nearly forfeiting your right and giving them the right to pursue and have any other information from you. It's nearly like a blank cheque that you're also saying that you will give them any other requests for data that they seek. And, they're not doing that for €100.
Well,
there's a much bigger price at the end of this, and ordinary people can't afford to pay that.
Charlie, can we get you in here and talk about the mechanics of how this is supposed to operate?
Yeah, you're supposed to register yourself, as Claire says, Mark. You go on to the website, there'll be a website, a special dedicated website, and you're expected to, declare yourself liable for this tax. I am a householder, I own the house or whatever. I'm not a tenant, because tenants won't have to pay. Small numbers of people will have exemptions, but very small numbers.
Who is exempt, Charlie?
What about local authority tenants?
Yeah, local authority tenants won't have to pay.
That's not a small number of people, Charlie.
Well, no, I mean, in the overall scheme of things, about 200,000 people will probably escape this. But a lot of people who, as Claire says, pensioners, people on social welfare will still have to pay.
Now, the government did say that he is going to try and implement measures to make it more equitable. I'm not sure he knows himself what those measures are going to be.
I don't either. He's exempting people, for example, who are on mortgage interest supplement. Now, that's a social welfare payment you get if you can't pay your mortgage. It's very hard to get that. About 18,000 people get that. And they're changing the rules on that so that you won't be able to get that now unless you're a year in mortgage distress. So the vast majority of people are going to have to register for this, and they're going to use the database of the ESB, for example. Check out, if you don't register, they'll look at all the ESB connections in your area and see what houses have ESB connections, and do a kind of cross-check that way.
Of course, many tenants have ESB, have their own ESB bills and ESB connections.
Exactly. Well, they would. Well, they're going to cross-check as well. They're going to use the Residential Tenancies Board.
While you're there on the subject of registering, I mean, this is... talk about being bizarre, ludicrous and lousy. You can do it online, you can do it through the post office, but if you decide to go down in person and pay your cash...
You can't do it. No.
Oh, you can do it, but they will charge you another €10 on top of it.
I just looked at Phil Hogan's speech the other night on that. At the moment, the second home tax, if you pay that in person in your local authority, they charge you an extra €10.
For the pleasure.
For the pleasure of doing that, because they want you to go online, because it's simpler for them.
It's cheaper for them to facilitate, yeah.
So with this one, they're not going to go that route. They looked at doing that, but they're not going to go that route. So you will be able to go into your county council and pay it over the counter. Now, but of course, you know, this one is where it goes. I mean, this is 2 years at €100, and then we're going to get a property tax, and that really grates with people, given that this country is a mess because of property. We have a very close attachment to property. A lot of us have paid stamp duty, and people are burdened with massive mortgages. And the other issue is we already pay bin charges. We do. You know, there is a tax on the household, and water charges are coming in as well. So that's why it grates with people so much, I think. You know.
So, Charlie, would you advocate what Clare is saying? Would you say to people to stand up and just say, no, I refuse to pay it? Because of not so much now the €100, but of the end game of where this is going to?
Well, no, I mean, I'm not going to advocate anybody breaks the law, but I mean, I can see exactly why people would feel like that. I can sympathise very strongly with that view, but and a lot of people, this one gets more attention than anything else. Actually, the VAT measures in the budget will probably be more expensive, but it's not about the cost of this at all. It's the principle, I think. It just really, really annoys people. Something about Irish people and property taxes, we just don't like them.
But as you said, Charlie, we've paid plenty already.
Oh, we have, and this is seen as kind of a bailout tax, as it were, to bail out the country. It's imposed by the IMF, and it's all about the failure of banking and ordinary people being asked to contribute to that, to make up for that failure.
And when we see figures of €1,000 being suggested for where the property tax is going to quickly arrive at after this 2-year period, is that realistic, or is that scaremongering in itself?
No, I think if you look around the world where they have property taxes, and most developed countries do have a property tax, you're talking about a tax that could be up to 1% of the value of your home. Now, I know house prices have crashed, but even so, that could be at least a hefty sum for households. And we'll get there within 2 years once they get established, some kind of a register of properties and valuations, etc.
Well, Clare, according to Enda Kenny yesterday, it was all your fault that the whole bin charges thing in Dublin failed, and now they had to go to commercial operators. So are you hoping that he's going to be saying the same thing about the household charges?
Well, his historical memory is obviously totally inaccurate, because the bin service had been privatised well before, around the country, well before the introduction of the charge, and it was precisely what we warned, that once they began to charge for the service and turn a public service into a commodity, then it was there for the taking, and that it would ultimately be privatised. So it was actually the charging for it that led to that, rather than the opposition. We fought the fight on that. We weren't successful. But what he should remember is, in the mid-1990s, we fought a battle on the water charges, and we were successful in that. And the campaign off the backs of 3 councils in Dublin succeeded in the abolition of water charges for the entire country. And that's the precedent now that we're taking, against a backdrop of austerity, when this is the first time people can say, actually, I can do something about what's gone on in this country. I can make a stand.
Clare, yourself and a few others will be holding a press conference this morning, calling on others to join you and refuse to pay it.
We will.
OK, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Thank you.
Now, as